Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We're going to be starting in about 1 or 2 minutes, just letting some people join right now. Um, so this is the webinar on FSX for ONTAP and S3 access points for connecting enterprise file data to AI and analytics on AWS. It's going to be a cool session. So we'll just wait for some more people to join and then I'll start the session. Meanwhile, for those who have joined, I just want to let everyone know, because we have a lot of people on this session, we have everyone's microphones on mute, which means that you can't actually talk to us, but we do want you very much to communicate with us. We're going to have some polls throughout the session, so that will be a way for you to tell us sort of like where you are just in your journey. But more importantly, we have the Q&A section. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, find where the Q&A section is. We really encourage you to ask questions. We will address the questions as well as we can. There might be questions that we can't answer right now. We will send an answer after the session. But definitely questions, anything that pops up, just put it in the Q&A. We'll address this in order to make sure that everything that we talk about here is clear, and there might even be some interesting topics we haven't thought about. So please take part in this session. We want it to be more a discussion than just a one-way presentation. So just wait. It's time now. Yeah, I think we've waited long enough, and now we have quite a lot of people in the session. So thank you everyone for joining. This is a session which is titled Unlocking Business Value from File Data. So what we're going to talk about in this session is how Amazon for FSX, Amazon FSX for NetApp ONTAP, or FSX for ONTAP for short, and S3 access points can be used to connect enterprise file data to AI and analytics services on AWS. My name is Robert Bell. I'm a product specialist at NetApp, and I have with me Promise. Promise, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Rob. So my name is Promise. I am a solutions architect at Amazon Web Services. I've been here for a couple of years, but prior to that, I spent a few years at NetApp. I think we are both passionate about this topic because of what it provides. Um, we've had S3 for roughly 20 plus years, and it gives customers a variety of ways to access data. And it's not in the same mode, or it's not the same type of access as other types of storage services. So I think getting other services into the same paradigm for data access, I think it's a game changer. I think that's why we sound a bit excited about the topic. So please interact with us. I'll keep my eyes on the chat, and me and Robert will have a good conversation, try to fit in your questions into the webinar as we go along. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, sure. So I think this is an interesting topic for me because it really is something that I would say is kind of like a breakthrough, because it's not, I mean, we're constantly seeing marginal improvements and developments in every area. But sometimes when you connect two different areas that were not connected at all, you bridge the gap, then it's not just a minor change. It really changes the whole paradigm. And I think that this is something that, for those of you who are not familiar with, I think you'll see this through when we show what we're talking about here and the use cases. I think hopefully it will be clear why this is such a big deal. This is not the first time we've done a webinar on this. I think we initially just wanted for people to know what it is, because it was really only announced quite recently in the last reInvent event. But now more and more people are using it, and we're discovering more and more use cases and seeing really the potential. So what we wanted to do in this session really is to, first of all, to explain what this new breakthrough technology is, but also talk about the use cases, because there are a lot of practical use cases that can be done right now with this technology. And we want to explore some of them and hopefully give you ideas of how you can use this in your organization. That's the real point here. So like we said before, there'll be polls, but I really do encourage you to ask questions about this topic because it's important for us that we really make it clear what this is, what it isn't, and really to understand how to use it in a way that benefits your organization. So I'd like to get started with the presentation, but first we want to do a quick poll to just see who it is we're talking to. So um, this is a question, how familiar are you with Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP? So please answer here so we kind of get a feel about how familiar you are with the uh, the storage service that we're going to be talking about. Um, this is something that I think this is based on the ONTAP technology, which is not new. It's been around for decades, but it is now available as a service in AWS. So maybe some of you know ONTAP. We just want to know how familiar you are with FSx for ONTAP, which is the ONTAP as a service on AWS.
Yeah, it's been around
Promise?
for 4
Yeah.
years. So it's a fully managed first-party service on Amazon Web Services. So in terms of customers having the same look and feel of a file system, ONTAP file system, in this case, it's fully managed by a service team within AWS. You get support, and it's the same service as you would if you had a file on premises.
Okay, so that's interesting. We got some people using it as storage, some people who know about it but are not using, and actually there are also people who are not very knowledgeable about it. So I think that when we talk about FSx for ONTAP, we will try as much as possible to really give a clear understanding of what it is and what it does. We can't go into too detail because it really there's too much to cover in one session. But if there are specific things that those of you who are not familiar with you want to ask, then please do so here. So I think we'll move on to just to talk about the agenda for this session. I'm going to start off by talking about the gap, which is something that sort of like was created not intentionally, but just occurred, which is what we're addressing here. So it's a data accessibility gap that well, I would explain, and then we will see how you can bridge this gap and do a lot more with file data. Then we'll move on to some practical use cases, which can be applied across different industries where we're taking this new opportunity, this technological enabler for new kinds of architectures or new kinds of services or new kinds of business. And we're going to take that and see how it can be applied in different cases. And then we'll summarize with sort of like the values and a short demo so that you can sort of see it in action. Um, what I wanted to start off with really is kind of like just zooming out. And this is something, Promise, I think you're very familiar with this. And something that we know about, but often we forget the huge amounts of data that is stored today in file systems. So every organization has been gathering data for a long time, for decades possibly, and this data is sitting in file systems. Now, about 80% of that data is unstructured. So this, what would you say? Is this something that that people are aware of, or is it something that's kind of like this
I
hidden
I
issue?
think people aren't distinguishing between their enterprise data and let's say their data lake or the
Mm,
data they want to process or analyze. So what customers will do is they have their enterprise data, but they create separate data lakes. And that could be a Hadoop or HDFS file system or S3. So customers will have different silos of data. And when you talk about separation, it's separate on-prem, also in the cloud with FSx. Your file systems are deployed within networks or VPCs, and those aren't connected to public services or general availability services like Bedrock or services where they're traditionally using APIs to talk to data. So there's
yeah,
a separation there. I think it's not well known, but customers don't really know about the access patterns or the networking requirements to get access to their enterprise data or their
right.
data lakes. So I think it's something we
Yeah.
can also dive into as we go on.
And it's actually a very interesting point because I think that was when S3 was developed and launched. That was in mind. Make data you can store the data, but also make it very easily accessible to
Yeah.
like for as a data lake or for all sorts of services that are coming that are sort of like in the roadmap. So S3 is kind of like just the go-to when it comes to a new service that needs to analyze data or work with data. S3, because it has this easy, you just talk through the API, it's very easy. That is great. But then what's happening is that the data that was before, that was either the systems that were around before S3 came along, the traditional systems are still pumping out these files into file
It's still
systems.
there.
It's
Yeah,
still there, and honestly, it's not simple to move that because there's a lot of dependence on the enterprise applications that still rely on file communication. So
yeah,
what we end up, I think, with is when it comes to AI, machine learning, analytics, things which are things that everyone is doing now. There's not a single company that's not doing something related to these topics. And as you said, if there's the data lakes, there's the data in the data lakes, which you can access easily. But when it comes to this enterprise file data, that can often get left out. And then it's kind of like a missed opportunity. And I
yeah,
think that's really what we want to talk about here.
yeah, yeah.
So we do have another poll just to keep everybody alert and make sure that you're fully engaged with us. Um, so this question is, what describes your experience with storage on AWS? This is kind of like maybe to understand how involved you are in the storage part of things, because that's really where the area we're touching here, although it relates to the applications and use cases, which are more about AI analytics, the core is the data and how the data is stored is an important thing. So we do want to kind of like get an idea of how knowledgeable you are, how experienced you are when it comes to storing the data. So we should have the results coming in soon. And promise, you've been in storage like for a long time in
Over a decade. So
yeah,
I think in that time you work with storage admins, database admins,
yeah,
developers, and different people across different organizations. But I think your experience in your knowledge of storage, I think it's kind of a fundamental thing in terms of how you build applications and
exactly.
services. So I think, um, yeah,
Yeah, I
being
mean,
able,
it has changed a lot over the past decade, I would say. It's changed, but I think the core concepts are really understanding what it means that storage is not sort of like a given, but something that you do have to have a certain understanding in order to really be able to make the most out of the data that is stored. And I think that's really the key here.
yeah, I think today we're just focusing on access. So in terms of
Exactly, yeah.
how applications access data, correct?
Exactly. So yeah, we've got a mixed audience this time too. So from some people with no hands-on experience and some people with basic or are learning. Actually, I think the majority has basic knowledge and is learning, and we got some experts here too. So we might have some interesting questions when it comes to we're not, yes, as you mentioned, just for everyone, we don't expect anyone here to be a storage expert. What we're talking about here doesn't require deep knowledge about storage, but it's more about, as Promise said, the access, um, being able to access the data in a way that doesn't ruin anything, that sort of like keeps everything running, that doesn't disrupt anything, that doesn't cause extra costs or extra operational effort. So,
Yeah,
so at this point, I think I want to sort of present the main problem that we're talking about here. And it's not really a problem because it's not something that it can't be solved. It's more just something that happened, an occurrence that happened because two separate technologies were developing in parallel. So I said that, I said about ONTAP earlier. NetApp developed ONTAP, I don't know, 30 years ago it was launched, and this is sort of like this enterprise file system that has been evolving and developing over the years. And it really has tons and tons of very, very advanced and useful features, and it can be applied in lots of different workloads. And a lot of companies rely on ONTAP as like the storage for the enterprise file system, which is all the documents, the images, videos, logs that are being created by different systems, research data, engineering data, customer logs, and reports. That is often stored in these systems, and ONTAP is one of the leading technologies for storing that. And then you've got, in parallel to that, you've got these new services that keep popping up, and these services which are really, I think, the services that are driving modern innovation. If you start from scratch, you're going to put all your data on S3 and you're going to be using these services and everything will work seamlessly. I think that the issue really arises when it's kind of like moving from the old approach to the new approach. So traditionally, before the cloud, everything had to be stored on in data centers, and storing files in data centers was just the common practice. Now the question is, okay, you're doing new things in the cloud, but you also want to bring the traditional data, sorry, the data that's created by the traditional applications. You want to bring that into the mix. And this is where the gap is because S3 has direct access to all of these services. File systems don't have direct access. That's more that these systems are not, they don't really speak file-ish, so if they want access to files, what you would have to do typically is put those files in a data lake, right? I mean,
Yeah,
what do
exactly.
customers typically do in this situation?
It's a complex challenge. So what customers will do in this situation if they had data that's come from on-premise storage systems, or they've migrated the application into AWS and they still need file systems, they use file systems to persist data. They'll have to copy that data, and that's a challenge. It means the data is it's not always up to date. You have to do continuous syncing. You have to translate permissions from one type of storage to the other. You have different formats and different ways of storing and getting access to the data. So it means you have to create two models of managing data in your head, say, or in your processes. One file based, one object. You have to keep them in sync. And that's a challenge because think about the developers who create software. They don't want to have to maintain two models of accessing data. So
Right.
developers wouldn't want to shift their mode of access to file-based if they're used to object access. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge for those who manage the data.
Yeah, and I think something that I've heard in many cases, when we talk to customers, we hear about one of the issues that there's huge amounts of data. Now, a very small amount of that data is very, very relevant and very important, but it's not easy to find I mean, you don't need all the data, and moving petabytes of data is a struggle. I mean, it's something you can do, but it takes time. There's effort, cost, and a lot of complexity that comes with that. So I think that in some cases it's fine. These methods are improving, but instead of trying to improve the old way of doing things, what we found now has happened, and it's something that I think is really why it's a breakthrough, because instead of trying to improve the process that we did, we're just eliminating this whole issue. And that's where the topic that we're going to talk about comes in. It is now possible to attach an S3 access point to FSx for ONTAP. FSx for ONTAP has volumes inside which are file systems, so it's storing file data. Now, it is possible without changing the file data at all to add something which is called an S3 access point, which allows services to see the data that's inside the file system as if it was in an S3 bucket. So instead of moving this data into an S3 bucket and then creating this data lake and doing all of the transformation, all of the permissions, building everything from scratch, instead it's just a matter of saying, let's leave everything exactly as it is. We'll just allow this direct access through, in a way, through translating the language or the ways that you access files, and translating that into the same way that you would access S3. So no data's moving. It's
Mhm.
really just a matter of being able to read the data in a different way, kind of like learning a new language instead of using sort of like a translate.
It's not that difficult. It's not so the language is already there. S3 is 20
Right.
years old. It's the same APIs, the same S3 APIs you're using to access the data. If you walk back a little bit, you don't have to move the data. Think about if that's petabytes of data to do an initial sync. You don't have to do that. If you
Right.
have changes that are hundreds of gigs, you don't have to transfer that. It means you have a few minutes to send an API call to the service to create an access point to a subset of your data or to the entire data set to access. So the time it takes for you to do that data transfer and sync, which could be hours or days, we've shortened that down to a few minutes. You can access the data instantly with an
Right.
existing API S3. So it's It's very interesting, and I think there's a host of use cases where I think organizations will see the benefit of accessing existing data. And I think we've got a couple of use cases we'll walk through, but
Yeah,
it's a very flexible solution because it leverages AWS's technology. So access points have existed for years, and they are secure within the cloud, protected by policies. I think we'll get into that, but I'll let you
yeah.
go on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that what we're going to try and do here, because we don't want to talk about the theory too much. We want to talk about the practice. And I think through seeing the use cases, we can then maybe understand better the underlying mechanism instead of really just going through every detail. But really, I think that at this point, I really would like to move on to the use cases. But as I said before, any questions that you want to ask about this is the time to just put it in the Q&A and we will address that. But like I said, I think that when we start seeing it in practice, then things will start fitting together. And I think what we can see on this map here, we got on the left side, we got this very, very valuable data, which has so much you can do with that data if you use it correctly. And then on the right side, I mean, things that you can do today with AI, it's services like Bedrock, which can just connect the applications to um, connected to dozens of different foundation models. You got
Models.
SageMaker, which where you can create your own foundation models based on your data. You got Amazon Q, where it's just really just creating these very, very easy to use and easy to apply chatbots where you can chat with your own data. And you got like things like Glue, which can scan the data and organize it in a way, structure it in a way without actually moving anything. Athena for queries, and then you got the serverless applications where you can really start developing new applications and attach those applications to the enterprise data without moving the data, which I think for developers is really a great thing. So we do have two questions here. I think I can answer these very quickly. I think the question of replication, I'll just make it clear. If the data is stored in FSx for ONTAP, so if you've got FSx for ONTAP, you created a file volume and the data is in there, then there's no replication at all. The data is read directly from the file by the services, of course, translated it's made available by the access points. But if the data is on premises, for example, in an ONTAP system, and you want to use these services which are in AWS, so you've got like the data, the source of the data on premises and the service in AWS, what you can do in that case is do a very simple replication, which is something that's built into ONTAP. So FSx for ONTAP and ONTAP on premises, they both have this feature called Snap Mirror, which just creates a mirror copy without any effort. It's all automatic. You get a mirror copy in FSx for ONTAP of what you have on premises, and then you can attach all of these services as if the data was the source of the data was in AWS. So no moving, no replication. Again, replication is only an option if the data is not in FSx for ONTAP and you want to bring it to FSx for ONTAP. And again, that's something that is built in. It's not, you don't need any additional external tools.
So,
Uh,
so you that's the question about replication, right? So you don't have to copy the data. It's accessible. There was another question on what can you access with, and I think the person who asked the question said cloud or AI
mm,
tools. Yes, from anything that has access to S3. That could be your AI agent running anywhere in Bedrock or even from your local machine with um, access to S3, with access to a role or credentials. Yes, you can access data in an FSx file system. So basically, it's unlocking that gap between enterprise and cloud-based or tools that you use to access data. Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
There was
Um,
a question on performance. Do you mind if
yeah.
I just quickly address that? So, in this case, what we're dealing with is providing access to the data, and the performance will go through the access point. And S3 has its way of limiting access to resources. So that could be things like the number of puts and get operations. We're still bound to those constructs. Also, each file system has a limit in terms of throughput levels and performance. We can't exceed those. So if you have more deep dive questions around the performance, maybe just reach out to us and we'll leave our contacts and we can help you answer those questions. But there are limits to answer that question.
Yeah, and just a question about just getting practical knowledge about this. So I think there's already a lot of resources about this. I would say to start off on the documentation on the Amazon site. Just look for AWS documentations, look for FSx for ONTAP. Everything is in there, including this S3 access points, how to set them up. Everything you need to know about it is in there. It's pretty straightforward. We've also got videos on YouTube. We've got videos, webinars. So we will be sharing this information wherever possible. I think I think we will answer some of these questions. There's quite a lot of questions, and we'll answer some of them as we show the use cases. Um, but again, maybe just to clarify the issue of the migration, if the data is not in FSx runtime, you need to bring it in. If it's ONTAP to ONTAP, that means any ONTAP system on premises to FSx for ONTAP, then you don't need any third-party tools. It's built in. There's built-in mirroring capability. But if it's from a different system, maybe not non-NetApp equipment, then you can use AWS tools or third-party tools for the migration, whatever you typically use. Um, yeah, so FSx for ONTAP, it's a service, it's an independent service. There was a question about whether it has to have ONTAP on-prem, and the answer is no. You can, it's like any other AWS storage service. You can just use it directly as the storage system. The data doesn't have to come from anywhere, specifically from ONTAP. It can be data that is generated by the applications connected to FSx for ONTAP or migrated. But it is a standalone system that doesn't require ONTAP. ONTAP is part of the service itself. So I think we'll move on just to get to the use cases. And meanwhile, we can answer some questions, but we do have one more poll question before we go into the use cases. So this question is, how would you describe your organization's involvement with AI use cases today? So this is kind of like where we want to see, we have I think, three different areas of use cases here, and we want to see where to focus. Yeah, I think that I've seen there's a lot of activity around AI and AI initiatives, and because AI is advancing at such an overwhelming pace, it seems like everyone has to move fast because if you don't start doing things now, then it's going to change and you might be missing out something. So even if what we have today is not the final thing that we will have in the future, I think using it now is very important in order to see how your organization can use AI, how it can benefit from AI. And really getting a hands-on experience. But the cool thing is when it comes to AWS, these services don't require you don't have to do any building complex infrastructure. You can plug into a service, and we will show you how you can also plug your data into this service without any infrastructure. You just play around with it, and then, if you like it, you continue. If you don't, you move on to a different service, right?
Yeah, precisely. We've got services that you can get access to foundation models. We've also got services that can help you fine tune your models or do training. So think about SageMaker. We've also got services that also are have their own ways of processing data, things like transcribe, poly. So
Yeah.
there's a host of services within this space. But in terms of what we're not going to say this is for a particular industry or a particular type of people. I think in every industry, I think everyone is adopting AI in various ways. So I think when we say is AI core to what you're doing or you're not
Yeah.
involved yet, I think just be honest with us. I think with we what we see is everyone is doing one or two things with AI. Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see the results which are about to come up. Oh, it's actually mixed results. Yeah. So yeah, I think the majority is either core or they have active initiatives in progress.
Mm.
Yeah, the rest are trying it out. A small amount are not involved yet, but I think that what we're showing today is an example of kind of like low-hanging fruit. So when it comes to AI, this will be the first use case that we want to talk about, and I think I'll actually bring that up now. What I want to talk about is, um, you know, you put your file data to work with Gen AI workflows. Now, I think that the challenge is in many cases, do you have to be an AI expert to use it? And I think that when it comes to services like the service we're going to see here in this example, like Amazon Bedrock, you don't need to be an expert. That is it's something that really when it comes to understanding the models, choosing the models, it gives you this really great experience where you can try things out. You're on Amazon Bedrock, you can see the different models, you can chat with the models and just see, is the result what you expect. You can try different things with things like RAG, like retrieval augmented what is it? Retrieval
Generation.
generation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Forgot my spelling, my English. But you can when you try out these things, I think it really does. It just makes it so much more accessible for so many more people.
Yeah.
So I'll just sort of like present what we're seeing here on the screen. This is kind of like we want to start in each case with go back to the challenge that I spoke about at the beginning in the context of Gen AI, and then show you how the the architecture that we're talking about here is, or the S3 access points with FSx for ONTAP, how that really um, eliminates this problem completely. But then we'll show some specific use cases. So what we want to look at is Amazon Bedrock, which is a service that as I mentioned, it connects you to it connects your applications to the different foundation models, and then you can do everything that these models can do, like summarizing information. You can do Q&As, create these chatbots. You can do generating new information, and really depending on the model and what the model can do, whether it's text, images, voice, whatever is available. Now, knowledge bases in Amazon Bedrock is the way that you feed data into it, and it doesn't directly access files. So this is something that what we see is when it comes to Amazon Bedrock, you can think of all these amazing things to do, but if it doesn't have direct access to the data, then the file data might be left out, or it would mean starting to copy these files, which we said is an issue that you don't want to address, you don't want to deal with. So what we do here in this case is we just put an access point on FSx for ONTAP, and then all of the information that is in the files can be seen by Amazon Bedrock through the knowledge bases, and it's just basically the data's there. It can scan the data, it can index it, and then straight away you can start generating information based on AI generation based on this. And I think that what I just want to say about this, I think the most important thing is that the data is not moved into Bedrock or into the foundation models. The data stays as files here, same location, and the permissions that you have for these data stay the same. So you're not necessarily accessing all the data. Maybe there's a certain type of data or a certain directory, or just based on existing access permissions, you want to allow Amazon Bedrock to see some of the data, then you can do that in the access point configuration.
Yeah, it's you can think about this like Lego. So Bedrock has access to S3. We're just replacing the S3 bucket here with an access point bucket alias. So it's there isn't any complexity. You create the access point and you point Bedrock to the access point, and it can have access, it has access to data, just like you said. The permissions don't change. It's the same. We gave the access point a user identity to have access to data because it needs to be secure. We don't want to expose your data to the whole world through S3. So we have to maintain security there, and data isn't moved. So your data stays in the same place, reads and writes. That's pretty very critical. So when you get access to get, you can also use S3 APIs to write back. And also, the same applications that created the same original source data can still keep on accessing, modifying, making changes, creating new content. As the content is written to the file system, the volume, that data is also exposed via the access point to Bedrock. So
Yeah.
you can quickly go on. I think you're going to
Yeah,
interrupt
no,
me.
I think the point here is that not only you're not migrating or moving or copying the data, you're also not migrating or moving or changing the processes, the workflow. So people are using certain applications in a certain way. You don't have to come and say, well, from now on, the data is going to be, in a different format. So you have to change the applications. You have to change how you access the data. Everything is exactly the same. It could be a Windows computer accessing the files through SMB, and it will still be the same. You haven't changed anything there. And yet the same information that you can access through SMB or NFS with a Linux device, you would be seeing the same information through this as if it was in an S3 bucket. So I think everyone is happy because you're not changing anything.
Correct.
So I think maybe I'll move on to the use cases and I'll try and address some of the questions that came up here while we do that. I think there are questions about like what the type of data you can feed in. And Amazon Q is mentioned here. So um, there was a question about Google chat logs, whether you can feed that into Amazon Q through FSx for ONTAP. And I mean, any data that's on FSx for ONTAP, if it's a log, doesn't really matter where it came from, it can be fed into Amazon Q or into Amazon Bedrock or any of the other services. And then the, how it would be the question how it would be indexed, I think that really depends on the model that you're using. So these are things that it's different models have different handle different data in different ways. So I think it's something that there is a lot of information, knowledge about that. So if you sort of like say which is the best model for this type of indexing this type of data, you will find that information. But also trying things out um, is an important thing. And the cool thing is that if you want to change it, you can change it. You don't have to change the infrastructure to change the model that you're using. So the first example I wanted to give is if we look at financial services, let's say a bank that has um, a lot of information in file format, which is, for example, policies and compliance documents. And this bank, let's say, wants to develop some sort of a chatbot or some sort of a AI-based um, application where you can just simply ask questions in plain language about the policies, about the compliance, and get this information easily accessible when it's often very difficult to find that information when you scan through the piles and piles of data. This is one example. I'll just sort of say show some other examples from different industries. What you can see is sort of like the same service, Amazon Bedrock, doing the same kind of things with similar kind of data, but the use case will be very different. So if you're in healthcare and you've got tons of research and clinical data, you want to use that and derive some sort of insight out of this piles and piles of research data. If it's manufacturing, then you've got the files that are related to the products themselves or the systems themselves or the processes where you have change orders in the development and gathering all of this information saying, let's say I'm developing a product, say, how will the product change if I change a certain feature? How, if I'm designing some sort of a product, what implications if I change this component, how will this affect the overall weight of the product, for example? Those are the kind of things you can do with AI, and AI is very good at getting huge amounts of information, giving you a very simple answer. And then if it comes to professional services, you can have the ability to look through tons and tons of contracts and case files and just asking simple questions, getting simple answers very quickly. So this is sort of like the examples you wanted to show, and it's not limited to this. Basically, whatever industry you're from and whatever it is that your organization does, what we're saying is get the information that's been piled up, feed it into Amazon Bedrock, and then just start asking questions. So yeah, the question if it's a chatbot, well, it depends on the model. Some of the models are just text, so you would create a chatbot. Some of them can do um, development, coding. Some of them can create images. So it really depends on the model, and that's a whole other topic. And it is advancing tremendously fast. So whatever models you'll be using now, you'll get more models, and having something like Amazon Bedrock where you can just switch the models and advance the whole application is a benefit here.
So I think the question on is it only chatbots? No, not necessarily. So you think about data that exists in S3. the data in FSX is accessible in the same way. So it could be any analytics service, Bedrock, SageMaker, Glue, data cataloging service. If you have any data processing engine, it could be running in, let's say, Databricks. It could be running in another service that runs in AWS. It could be logs you have in FSX that you want to ingest into, let's say, something like whether there's monitoring tools where you can just logs into and visualize the content. Just think about data that you can access via the object APIs. Basically, that's what FSX is giving you the ability to do, or the access point gives you the ability to do now. So it's not just chatbots or AI agents. That's one use case. I think we'll go through some other use cases. Um,
Yeah. And
I think
there,
one
there
that's
was there
even,
was oh,
so I was
sorry,
going to
it's just a
say,
question that I'll let you finish. I just don't want to miss this question.
yeah,
It's a very interesting question.
go on, go
But
on.
go ahead.
As I was going to say, even think about the serverless use case. So even Lambda doesn't really have direct access to FSX file systems. So if you have workflows, I think we have that as a use case, don't we? So if you have workflows that did need serverless computing, that's another use case, I think.
Yeah. So the question that came up is if I understand it correctly, it's whether there is the ability to expand, modify, and delete from the AI agent side. So I think if in general the question, if we ask the question, the files are managed sort of by file systems or applications and users who use the file system. So you're writing files and changing files, deleting files. Can you do the same thing from the S3 side? And the answer is yes. However, it's something that you would want. It's very flexible. You would want to control that. So you want to. It's what you're doing is you're saying the files can now be accessed by a new type of user. What kind of permissions do you want to give that user? You can give them read only. Some cases you only need read only because you just want to sort of ingest the information and then output like answers based on that information. Sometimes you might want to be able to change the information, modify it, right back to that. And you can do that too. So this is just a matter of permission. So depending on whether you're giving read only or read write permissions, it is possible. Everything is possible. You can modify files, you can write files, you can delete. Just something that you need to be aware of that it's when you are designing the system, um, you would make a decision based on um,
Yeah.
your
Yeah, and it's a lot deeper than that in terms of the flexibility around the security. Um, you could define policies to point to, let's say, a particular folder within a bucket, a volume. So you don't want to give access to, let's say, the entire project data. You can say you only have access to the output or to a specific section. And also you can be clever in terms of how you tailor those policies. You can say only particular types of files that have this extension type. So you can use, you can filter around what you're giving that granting access from different access points. And you can have multiple access points to the same data set. So you can have one access point pointing to a particular directory, another one pointing to a different directory. So there's a lot of flexibility there.
Okay, yeah, I do want to move on because we've got two more of these use cases to show. And the next one I want to talk about is combining analytics and machine learning. So this is something that I think if you look at the services, AWS Glue that can do kind of like ETL as a service, it can organize the data, but without having the complex ETL workflows and infrastructure. And you've got Athena where you can do SQL queries on data without having the SQL database. You've got SageMaker, which actually can create a model based on your data. And then something which is uh, really cool, a quick suite, which kind of combines both AI, machine learning, and well, machine learning, AI, and analytics. But I think what's really cool about it is that you don't have to be an expert on any of these things. You talk to quick suite in plain language. You just say, I want a dashboard that shows me, certain information which is based on analysis of certain data, and it builds it for you, right? It's that simple. Or am I exaggerating?
Not really. So, Quick Suite can integrate with S3 directly. It can integrate with uh, data catalogs you have in Glue. It can integrate with all our database services, but it helps you to easily interact with data. And we can transfer that same functionality down to FSX data. So you can say, ingest this data from this through this access point and create a cool dashboard. It's designed for not just scientists, but regular users who just want to visualize content. So it's a it simplifies that whole process of doing the ETL. I think you've said that already. So you don't have to do the you don't have to clean and then ingest the data. So it's a very simple tool to use.
Yeah, but I think it's there's a broad selection of different services, and we showed some of them here. But really, you can find a service that fits your level of knowledge and your requirements, and there's a lot of different choices. And what we're saying here is, it doesn't matter which service you use, you can access it. You can access the files directly, which is something that hadn't been possible before. So with this approach, you are accessing the data without actually having to change the data at all. So it eliminates the complexity of, we keep saying this, there's zero data copies, there's zero building these data lakes and managing the ETL workflows and finding, how to synchronize the different copies, because that there's just no additional copy. So this is something that I think is super interesting. It goes beyond like just the simple AI, in the fact that you can do, for example, if you think of start off with financial services, a bank that has tons and tons of transaction logs and information about customer behavior, for example. Feeding all of that, I mean, if you take Glue, for example, that can structure this data and then feed it into SageMaker, you create a model, which is this model is created based on the normal behavior of the specific bank. So that means that you can use that as a fraud detection system. So if you see something, transactions are fed into that model, and the question is, does this transaction fit the normal patterns? So because fraud detection is it's something that everyone wants to do, but it really becomes difficult when it comes to practice, because a lot of people have to do a lot of things for it to work properly, and that's where it often fails. But here, if you've got this super intelligent model, which just instantly, in microseconds, tells you, yes, this looks like fraud, flag it, and then check it. You got you very, very instant value, saving a lot of time and effort, and immediate results. And the same thing goes for whether it's in retail, it's not necessarily the customer transactions, but rather the supply and demand. What you want to detect anomalies in supply and demand so that you won't have issues. There, in manufacturing, it could be a way to predict. If you're based on the normal models, you could predict when equipment is going to fail based on the sensor data. And then in IT and software as a service, it's really trying to find operational issues by just analyzing huge amounts of data. So this goes beyond just simple chatbots. This is really things that change how the organization can operate and make it much more efficient. So, anything to add here, Promise?
Oh yeah, I can. So in terms of the history of organizational data that exists in file systems, so if you think about the logs that they have, think about the your retail profile. Most of these retail organizations, they have all your shopping history, and it's all stored in somewhere. Most likely a log stored in a file system somewhere. And they can use that to train models and create dashboards to predict or even tailor services to you. So I think if organizations want to quickly give insights to the users, I think that they do have to use their services. So if it's in file system, they can easily do that now.
Yeah. So really, I mean, it's what we're talking about here, that the options are really endless. It's about, the different things you can do really depend on the quality of the data. But if you've got good quality data, even in huge amounts, and you're feeding that into systems like SageMaker or other systems which really just know how to create this model, and then you start querying this model, it's really something that can do things like um, predictive maintenance, predicting failures, just based on just by analyzing the patterns and seeing, okay, this is what happened before the failure. Therefore, I will be able to trigger it when I see similar behavior. So these kind of things, it's something that does require a little bit of fine tuning, but the the challenge that had been up to now of bringing the data into these models is now eliminated. So we have like about 10 more minutes, and I do want to show the third use case, which I think is less about AI. Well, it does involve AI, but less about how you can modernize how things are done in the application side. It's more about the processes. So if you think about a lot of things that even today are used, which are like scanned PDFs, things that are forms that people, clients, customers fill in manually, and they are scanned, and somebody has to feed that information into some sort of system, and it's usually just really going into files and just sitting there. And being able to access the information and summarize that information is very difficult. So if we talk about services like Amazon Textract, which can take scanned PDFs, scanned files, images of handwritten documents, and understand the logic there and translate that into knowledge, then you have a service like AWS Step Functions, which can do a series of simple steps that what would typically be done by people. I mean, people get the information, they scan it, they validate that everything is filled in and that there's no errors or there's nothing that needs to be flagged. And they put that into the system. Step functions can do that, and it can do that at a much greater scale with much less people. So this is something which, when it comes to speeding up processes that are manual and time consuming, it's really, really useful to do this with all of the huge amounts of documents that are piled up. So in this case, for example, in for FSI companies, financial services, the KYC, know your customer, having all of this information, feeding it into step functions and having the whole process automated, something that might have been a very slow manual process that takes a long time can be done instantly. When it comes to healthcare, a lot of the information is really sort of spread out from different sources, clinical records. Some of it is manual, some of it is typed into older systems, getting all that information and using that, and then performing automated processes, which are things, it's not revolutionary, but it's something that just you don't want to have hundreds of people doing something for hours when you can do it in a second with a device. So really making everyone's work a lot more efficient. In the public sector, still a lot of forms and permits that are done manually and scanned. And then in professional services, when it comes to contracts and invoices, again, a lot of that is kind of like this analog information that's being fed in by people, where you can do the whole process with services that just do it faster and more efficiently.
Yeah, I think this is very powerful when you have things that need to be event driven, so or scheduled or things that are sort of batch
Right.
or it could be even real time. So most of those services rely on things like Eventbridge or maybe CloudWatch and use services like queuing services and where you process lots of jobs, but you need to access if you need to access data that's in the file system, those things like Lambda can't really do that. But with access points now, we can power those services, those workflows that are very, like you said, you don't want people or you don't want to have to spin up servers. You don't have to spin up resources when you don't need that. You can do things in a new, more modern way.
Yeah. So if we kind of summarize the different things here, and these are some examples of things that we see companies doing with this new service or this new ability to connect services. It's not limited to these, really. It's something that is across all industries, across all different types of operations. But I think the key here is what S3 access points with FSx for ONTAP brings is the fact that you have a single data copy. You're not duplicating data. So lower cost, less complexity. You don't have to rewrite the permissions. The permissions exist already. You're just relying on something existing again. That saves time. It makes everything a lot more secure and a lot less complex. And then if you look at the business side of that, anyone here, you might be on the technical side, but if you talk to your the business people, the applications people, the product people, they will have faster access with the data to the services. So if they want to use all these new AI services, you can give them the access to the data and make um, more context, which brings better insights. So feeding in decades of information, which was just sitting there, not doing anything, unused, now feeding that into AI, suddenly you can discover really amazing things. So it is a lot of potential here. We've had some customers that are using it really are talking about the ability to keep the existing workflows while unlocking AI. So you don't have to choose between the traditional approach and the new approach. It's everything coexists here. And then we got a research company which really is talking about the fact that the direct access which now exists. So no one has to manage the process of bringing the data. The services see the data as if it was in a bucket, even though it's in the file system. I
Yeah.
think these are the great benefits
I
here.
think it sees the live data. So that's really powerful. Yeah.
Right, right. It's the like no synchronization.
Yeah.
It just what you see is what is there in the files. And again, that's also if a file has just been changed a minute ago, you can see the updated file. You don't have to wait for any kind of sync or anything. It's the live data. So I do want to show a quick, we just have really a couple more minutes. I want to show a quick um, demonstration. So really, this is the first example that we showed. I can get this up. Yeah. So we're talking about Amazon Bedrock, which uses an LLM or a large language model for Gen AI application for generating information. And then you got file volumes on FSX for ONTAP, which are connected to enterprise applications which use NFS and SMB. So now with S3 access points, you add that to the specific volume you want to feed the into the service. The data is ingested through the knowledge base as if it was in S3. And now if we see this in action, this would be here the AWS console. If you go to FSX and you choose the FSX for ONTAP volume, this is the file system specifically. In that file system, you can find the volume that you want. And this is a file volume that has, let's say it has files. Where did I go here? Yeah. And then when I'm in that volume, I can then click on from the actions, create access point. Once I've created the access point, I will get I'll define it, say, give it the permissions, whatever it needs. And then I will get an access point alias. So if I go to the access point, this is in S3. Under S3, I would find access points. I would find the one that I created for FSX for ONTAP. I go into it and then I have an alias, which is just an address. So this is saying this S3 access point is the one that you need to look at if you want to see these files. I just copy that. Then I go into Bedrock. I go to the knowledge bases and I go to the place where you can add the data source, which is an S3 URL, and I just paste that in there. So what I'm doing is I'm telling Bedrock, if you want, the data that you want is here at this address. What is actually happening is it's going to the S3 access point, and the S3 access point is showing what the information that is in the files as if they were S3. Once I've done that, I can go and see that the files that were inside the volume in FSX are indexed by the knowledge base. It's not that Amazon Bedrock is now speaking, accessing files. It sees the document source as S3, as we can see here, but it's not S3. It's actually a file. So we're giving it the capability to scan these files. We look at a specific file in here, and then you can test the knowledge base. This is just we tested this. We chose one of the models, and we asked a question where we knew that this information about this question is in one of the files. It would give the result, and then when I ask, sorry about that, still having trouble with technology. But if we ask the question, we get the answer. What we would see as the sources, and this is something that you can check when you get an answer. This is just testing it inside Amazon Bedrock. We can see the file that we saw earlier, which is a file that's in FSX for ONTAP, and it was accessed as if it was in an S3 bucket. So this is just a quick demonstration. What we want to do now is really to encourage you to just start playing around with this. So if you've got FSX for ONTAP, find a specific data set there that that you think you could do something AI related or analytics related, or just improve some sort of a process with the AWS services. Attach an S3 access point to it, and then just apply the service. Use as we saw, you use the address of the S3 access point, put it as the data source of that service, and then start playing around with it. This could be data that's in FSX for ONTAP or even on-prem mirrored to FSX for ONTAP. The idea is really to start small and then build. What you can see here, the QR code that you can see if you want to just take a quick photo with your cameras, it will lead you to a blog, a recent blog that was released that really shows several additional use cases which are not covered here, and explains how to set it up. So this might give you even more ideas of how to start. But this is really what we wanted. Um, just try it out. It's as simple as what I showed in this demo. Really can take a matter of minutes just to get everything up and running. There's no infrastructure involved. It's really just getting different services to talk to each other. You try it out, and then if it works, you can build on that. So I think we've reached the end of our time, but this is a good point if there's any additional questions that.
I think we've gone through all of the questions. I think there's one that's just left there around HDFS replacement with NetApp on-prem object store. I think that's a separate conversation, but
Yeah,
once that data lands either on S3 or on an FSX file system, you can expose the data to different services. So I think that's a different topic or different architecture or use case. So maybe reach out to us and we'll help with that.
right. So just a note for everyone, we will send out the recording so you can see this session again from the recording and share it with your colleagues who might have missed it. So this will be sent to everyone who's participated. So I just want to thank everyone for your time. I know there was a lot of information here. We didn't necessarily have the time to cover every detail, but really we encourage you to just start playing around with it. There's a lot of resources online, so you can find that information in the documentation, or in the blogs, in the videos. Everything is out there. So um, I want to thank you, Promise, for joining me here. I really enjoyed
Thank you.
this session. I think it was every time I present this, I learn new things. And I think it's really exciting seeing where this is going to go.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you soon in another one of our sessions.